DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone, and it is time to talk hockey with the radio voice of the Utah Hockey Club, Mike Folta. His appearance brought to you by Hercules First Federal Credit Union, growing stronger together. Mike, good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. How are we?
Good. You enjoying the downtime? No alarms, no airplanes? Holy cow, what are you doing with yourself?
I was down in PK's neck of the woods, down near St. George for a little bit. Went to Zion, and then stomped around Sedona and Arizona a little bit with my dad and my brother, and stayed out of trouble. And now we're back here in the Valley, ready to get back to work. The team practices again today, and so now we're back on the clock.
As far as the team goes, when you get down past this break and you can see the end in sight, it is time to make your push. We've been talking about the health. Expect them to be a little healthier to a degree, but you never know what's out there. Somebody could get hurt at any point, and you wonder if that will be the case as far as all that goes. But what is your sense that the team can make the push that it needs over, I think, what do they got, 26 left?
Yeah, something like that. And it's a little hard to tell right now. I think everybody was just fighting to get to this Four Nations break. And so that was kind of viewed as a major stopgap in the season, right?
Right.
It's a pretty big cutoff. And then the remaining games after this break, it's almost like its own season. It's almost like a full sprint, basically, from here on out till the middle of April. And we got some big games coming up that will – I don't want to say they'll tell a lot, these specific games, but they'll be a good indicator of if this team is ready to go coming out of the break. We're in Los Angeles on Saturday to take on the Kings, one of the best teams in the Pacific Division. And then we've got a huge game against the Vancouver Canucks at home on Sunday. And that's Vancouver's a team that we're trying to chase down in the standings. They're a couple spots ahead of us, kind of jockeying for that middle or for that wild card spot. So two huge games coming up that I think will give us a pretty good indication of, how this team used that break effectively or not effectively. And, I mean, if you win both of those games, then you're feeling pretty darn good about yourself. If you lose both of those games, then you're in some serious hurt moving forward.
The Kings are 7th. Vancouver is 8th. I mean, to your point, they could be Utah Hockey Club could be 3 or 4 points out of a playoff spot here, and they could also be 8 or 10 points out if things don't go well. So I know we talk about 26-game sprint, but it feels like better handle these two because that's a huge swing.
It's a huge swing. I mean, and you can make the argument that every weekend is like that, but rarely do you get a weekend like this against, two teams in your division, but also against a team in Vancouver that you need to track down. And Vancouver is interesting because they've traded away JT Miller. He was one of their best players, and he had there was a personal beef between JT Miller and Elias Pettersson, two of their best players, and it was so unreconcilable that they had to trade one of them. Have you guys ever seen anything like that in pro sports where there's
yeah, Jazz fans can think of something like that. Don't worry about that. Yeah, you can think about that. Yes.
I mean, seriously, like a personal beef that's so drastic on a competing team, by the
Jazz,
way.
Jazz, okay, all right, salt in the wound, yeah. It's Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, yeah.
It's unfathomable. Hey, by the way, how about the Four Nations game, U.S.-Canada, on Saturday night in Montreal, stacked up against the NBA All-Star game? You've got the Kachuk brothers fighting seconds apart in U.S.-Canada at Bell Center, and then over in the NBA All-Star game, no offense to the association, but you've got like Team Shaq and Team Kenny playing on a blue floor. It was just a little different what each league is doing with their respective All-Star break.
As far as the U.S. and Canada, all I got to say is FAFO Canada.
That was I mean, have you guys ever seen, like, hopefully you were watching that live or you got to see the highlights, because that was one of the best starts to a game I think I've ever witnessed. And in Montreal, like, that's a sacred town for hockey. And the Bell Center is a magical place. And you've got two brothers fighting right off the jump, and then JT Miller, the Canucks guy I mentioned, he jumps in for the third fight in 9 seconds. And then USA wins, and then we've got a matchup coming up on Thursday. I mean, like, what? The NHL got this right. They got it absolutely right with the Four Nations Faceoff. And it's hard to imagine the NHL, like, going back to an all-star game type format when you could pit these nations against each other.
Yeah, now those were fights. What Kesselring did last time out, I think it was, that was a do-se-do. That was not a fight. If you're going to fight, fight. Don't just hug guys on skates. I don't need to see that.
Hey, I'll defend my boy Kesselring here. He was standing up for himself, and you got to be careful. And those do-se-do matches can turn into a broken nose pretty quick.
Yeah, you think you're do-se-doing, and the other guy thinks you're fighting, and uh-oh, trouble.
I think if you go back and watch the third fight between U.S. and Canada, JT Miller throws, and he was taking on a guy a lot bigger than him, but he throws an uppercut so hard it actually comes around and hits him back in the helmet. Like he punched himself in the face. That's how hard these guys are fighting.
How many so you see these fights, what percentage of them, just ballpark it for us, are because of stuff that's happened before? What percentage is because of in the minute? And I hear a lot of times people say, well, yeah, once it's over, and, guys can go out for, a beer or lunch or whatever, play golf later on. Really? Or does stuff really stick and, 2 years later, like in baseball, and you know this growing up, like guys are throwing each other in the second inning, or pitchers throwing a guy in the second inning. That's because of something that happened last month, and they just haven't seen each other since last month.
So from what we've heard from Brady and Matthew Tkachuk, the two Bash brothers who started the party on Saturday, it sounded like they knew they were going to fight. Like they knew they were going to fight somebody to start that game. And they were playing on the same line, obviously. So they would have a chance to kind of go back to back. They were going to try and, fire up the boys a little bit. And from what Brady Tkachuk said, I think Matthew, once he saw the starting lineups, which is usually like maybe 20 minutes before the game, he knew he was going to go with Brandon Hagel, who he ended up fighting. Matthew plays for the Florida Panthers. Hagel plays for the Tampa Bay Lightning. So they've had some battles in the NHL in that Florida rivalry. And then, when it came to Brady Tkachuk, he knew he was going to fight, and he knew that Sam Bennett, his combatant, was not going to say no. So there was a certain level of a premeditated nature to it, where I think the Tkachuk brothers knew they were going to go somebody, but they just didn't know exactly who until a few minutes before the game. I think for the most part, it sounds like it was pretty organic. And then the JT Miller fight was all organic. That was just kind of in the course of play, and Miller had enough, and he didn't want to be left out of the action, and so he grabbed a 6'4" Canadian and started ripping the bark off him.
Well, what do they do then? This has been a smash hit, and we'll see what happens. I expect that it'll be even more of a smashier hit, I guess you could say, on the final, as far as going forward in subsequent years.
Yeah, well, we've got the Olympics coming up next year as well, and so that's going to be a supercharged event. Now, in the Olympics, you can't fight, otherwise you get kicked out. So you're playing under IIHF rules. That's like the international hockey governing body rules. So it's a little different for an IIHF event with the fighting and things like that. But like I said, it's hard to imagine the NHL going back to like an all-star game or anything. The one thing that I think needs to be addressed is just the injuries. Like we've seen a couple guys go down who have either been hurt in this tournament or they were hurt before the tournament, so they couldn't participate in it. There have been people wanting this tournament to be played in September before the start of the season, but then you're going up against football, and the American markets obviously don't want to do that. I mean, the timing of the Four Nations tournament was perfect because it's the first weekend after the Super Bowl, so it's the first weekend with no football, basically.
Right.
And the only thing it was going up against was the NBA All-Star Game, which, again, was, Team Shaq and Team Kenny or like the Rising Stars or something like that. So you picked a pretty good weekend to put this product on display. But like we've seen Charlie McAvoy for Team USA, really good defenseman. He got injured, and so he's out for the rest of the tournament. And it sounds like I don't know if there's a chance he misses games with the Bruins or not, but that's always a possibility when you have these international tournaments in the middle of the season. But I mean, you look at an All-Star game, and guys are just kind of going through the motions out there. It's not physical at all. That's not been the case here. I mean, you have superstars on the ice in USA and Canada and Sweden and Finland who are killing each other on the ice. At one point, it showed a stat for McAvoy. He had 4 hits in the game. This is like 5 minutes into the first period. He had 4 hits in the game. 2 were on Connor McDavid and 2 were on Sidney Crosby. So he was targeting the best players in the world on Team Canada. And that's the kind of event we have, especially when you get U.S. and Canada playing against each other. These teams do not like each other on the international stage. And you add in the fact that at the Bell Center in Montreal on Saturday night they're booing the U.S. national anthem. I think it adds a little extra juice.
I'll never forgive them for that.
Well, USA didn't forgive them either.
No, we didn't.
So it looks like the plan going forward is Olympics in 26 and 30,
Yeah.
the World Cup in 38 and 28 in between. Is that World Cup going to happen in the middle of the NHL season also? I can see the Four Nations event, but the World Cup sounds bigger, and it sounds like it would take more time and a longer break. And, I mean, the league's done the Olympics, but it doesn't feel like they've always embraced it. I mean, they did it 5 times in a row, but they didn't always love the break. That's been a little bit of a sticking point, even though they did it multiple times.
Yeah, and one thing that they really don't want to do, the league and the Players Association, is they don't want to make the season any longer than it is. Like this Four Nations break has been awesome, but they've really had to condense the rest of the schedule. And so when you're talking about like these international tournaments, one of the issues becomes travel and how do we play these games in Europe? How do we expand the game globally? Because we can do it in North America easy enough, but eventually if you're only doing it in Canada and the U.S., it's not fair to, half the hockey world, Sweden, Finland. Hopefully one day Russia can join because they have some of the best players in the world as well. But that becomes a big part of the issue is travel. If you're doing it in season, how do you get guys over to Europe if you are going to play it in Europe? Or part of it in Europe at least, and then get them back to the U.S. in a reasonable time for their NHL schedule. So they've done the World Cup of Hockey before, but there's a lot of logistics in terms of, is it going to be before the season? Is it going to be during the season? And all that stuff. But what we have learned from Four Nations is that we need to get back to this international play in some manner because it is way better than any NHL All-Star event that the league could put on.
You've done a lot of different sports in your broadcasting career. You're still young, but you've done a bunch. Which team do people root for as far as baseball in Indiana?
That's a great question. The most populous fan base. So I grew up in central Indiana, just outside of Indianapolis. The most populous fan base is that of the Chicago Cubs, definitely. And especially after 2016, you saw the W flags, they came out of the woodworks like roaches. But I would say the most passionate and the most educated fan base is that of the Cincinnati Reds, actually. I think those are the best fans in terms of they know the team, they know their sport. A lot of the Cubs fans are just, bandwagon fair weather fans. They like the Cubs because they were always on TV. I was a St. Louis Cardinals fan growing up. I was a big Yadier Molina fan. So I was a Cardinals fan, and also because some of my friends were Reds fans, and I wanted to, go after them a little bit. But I grew up a Redbirds fan. I haven't paid a ton of attention recently. Summertime is kind of my time off. Turn my sports brain off a little bit.
Okay, so that makes sense as why you just dissed the Cubs then, because the Redbirds and the Cubs have a thing. And the reason why I bring it up, because on this date in 1998, Harry Carey passed, the legend.
Oh. Now, I could appreciate a good Harry Carey call.
And I'm hoping you would do one in his voice for us. That's the whole point of this.
Holy cow! Like one of those.
Yes, exactly.
Well, a Harry Carey call involves like a holy cow. It could be. It might be. Probably mispronouncing a name, right?
Yeah, there you go. Calling Mariano Duncan, calling him Duncan Mariano so he can Italianize him. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't make broadcasters like Harry Carey anymore. Of course, they don't let us drink in the booth either. But
that's a problem.
yeah. Who knows? Maybe we'll get that changed. Probably not. But
well, Mike, we appreciate a few minutes as always, and we will hear you back on the air this weekend. Big games coming up with the Kings and the Canucks that'll set the tone for the stretch run.
Yeah, guys, enjoy those games and enjoy the U.S.-Canada on Thursday night. It's going to be a blast.
All right. Hey, thanks for the time, Mike. We'll talk to you next week.
Yep. See you guys. Bye.
DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. Everything you missed in this show. Tons of college hoops. Hope even for the Utes. We'll get to that coming up. Stay with us.
For all of you less motivated listeners, it's time for your 9 o'clock. Where the heck have you been headlines?
Where you at?
With DJ and PK on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Call Trajan Wealth today. Your local, trusted financial fiduciary, 801-899-7600, or visit their website at TrajanWealth.com. Trajan Wealth bring you the Slacker headlines here at 9:32 as we get you up to speed on everything you missed in this show. This weekend, as we just had Mike Folta on, radio voice of the Utah Hockey Club, and we had Steve Cleveland on, former BYU coach, to talk college hoops. This weekend, if you're looking for competition, PK, none in the NBA, a little bit in hockey with the Four Nations tournament, and then college hoops is heating up. So for all of the local teams, this is an important weekend. Disappointing loss for the Aggies, who came close to winning in the pit but didn't pull it off. And BYU plays Kansas tonight. The Utah schools can sweep the Kansas schools. They're 3-0, with the Utes winning twice and BYU winning once so far. This is a big game for BYU, and that was a great weekend for the Utes.
Well, I would absolutely love to see BYU beat Kansas. And then we can look at them and say, hey, you're not in Kansas anymore, guys.
Nice.
Big game. Yeah, this is a big time of year. Every game is big, unless you've absolutely sewn up an NCAA berth, which I can't say for any of the teams here in the state.
But even then, Auburn and Alabama played, and that was a big deal.
It's a big game, but that's the curse of college basketball.
When you're
it's
that
a meaningless game.
Right. It's fun to play your rival and know you're both really good and you want to win.
Right.
But you also are like, what are odds these two teams are going to be 1 or 2 seeds?
And who cares if you're a 1 or a 2?
Right,
what difference does it make?
And 100% they're going to be 1 or 2 seeds.
So it's a big game, but it's not a big game. In terms of ramifications, it's not a big game. But when you're fighting for bids, those become huge. Alabama and Auburn,
I don't know.
Not
I feel
really.
like BYU and Kansas are fighting for bids. I feel
I'm
like
talking about the 3 teams in the States. I believe they are. I mean,
don't you think they're
Aggies,
both
Utes, and Cougs are fighting for bids.
BYU and Kansas, if I had to put NCAA tournament odds, they're 70-80% they're going to make it.
Slip away, man.
It can.
Okay,
That's not 100.
Let me ask you this.
But don't
and
you
I hate
think,
saying let me ask you this. Just ask it. It drives me nuts, and I just committed one of my
Let me answer this.
Yeah, nobody ever says that. You feel like there's a 70% chance, so you feel really good.
I feel pretty good about it, yeah.
I'm going to tell you that your next plane trip
Yeah, 70 or 80%. You're like, well, I think I'll drive. That's the answer to that.
Right, exactly.
I think it's more likely than not the Cougars get in. But to your point, they could absolutely drop a home game to Kansas. You go on the road. There really aren't easy road wins, right? I mean, you can get them, and teams do. It could slip away. It absolutely could slip away. They're 17-8. And once you start
fighting for a
once
bid.
you start getting in that 11, 12, 13 loss category, you start like, I mean, teams get in out of leagues like the Big 12. That's where we have to adjust our thinking, right? Mountain West teams didn't get in with 11 or 12 losses, nor will they this year.
No, not at all.
But in the Big 12, that 10, 11, 12, now there's 68.
Tonight's
you can't
right
rule
off
it
the
out.
bat. It's a toss-up.
The game. Yeah, I can see why you're saying that. I would say it's not a total toss-up, but I'd go 60-40 BYU.
I think it is.
Kansas isn't good on the road. BYU is very good at home. The home court's so important in
I
college
know, but
basketball.
You've
said it,
shooting is fickle.
and that's why it's 60-40 and no better than
What
that.
pure shooter do they have on that team?
I know. I hear you.
Nell, but he doesn't come up big in these games. He scores maybe 1 or 2 3-pointers.
Right, but because BYU is 12-2 at home, and because Kansas is 3-6 on the road, I'm going to lean BYU.
Sure, but I get it. But the leaning is
not a guarantee.
Not slapping your hand on the desk.
I'm neither driving to Wendover and putting it all on the blue. No, well, I guess they both wear blue, so that doesn't make any sense. I'm not pulling out my phone and putting anything on this. I mean, yeah, anything could happen. But I do feel like BYU has the advantage. They got the edge. Both teams are 17-8. Both teams are 8-6.
No, I hope you're right.
I think if you're BYU, you'd probably prefer that Kansas has beaten Utah and not come in with a little bit of an edge. You know, sometimes trying to bounce back from a loss when your program that expects to win, that can be a little extra.
I don't know that matters.
Is Kansas used to play in elevation?
Utah just beat Kansas State, and they came off a loss.
K-State not as good as Kansas.
Kansas isn't as good as Kansas. That's the most important thing.
That is true. And watching them, it was really apparent. Like they've had teams that had game changers, elite athletes you couldn't match up with, tons of confidence. You know, we've all watched Kansas teams where they're coming up court and they're like, we're going to score. And then we're going to go down and stop you. Yeah.
And the best player's a senior? Well, that just screams you're not good enough.
Well, unless you're loaded with 6 of those guys. But I get your point. They're 17-8. They're vulnerable. I mean,
they're good. They're okay.
Yeah, 17-8 is a good record, but we're used to seeing Kansas at 20-5 or 21-4.
Yeah.
And those extra L's, like the one they had at the Huntsman Center, are the ones that suggest, all right, you've been an A+ program for so long. When you're a B+, A-, it's noticeable.
Right, and then if they go down early, they did last year, then you start wondering, okay, are you running out of steam here?
And we don't follow it close enough, and maybe a little bit of it is scheduling, but they haven't been playing.
Yeah, but they've been going a lot of one-and-dones, and that's a slippery slope. It can be.
Yeah.
It works. You need one. You go after those guys because they're really, really good, and BYU's going down that road. But you've got to have other dudes who can make up for what the one-and-dones don't particularly have in those moments. And I don't know that they have it.
Yeah, Kansas 3-4 in their last 7 games.
Grady Dick is not walking through that door.
Boom! There it is. But they're 3-4, and at the same time, they beat 8th-ranked Iowa State in that stretch.
They're
dangerous. You never really know.
They're dangerous.
You never really know.
I heard you the first time.
I'm going to say one more. You never really. So we talked about that game with Steve Cleveland. We talked about the Utes reviving their NCAA tournament hopes with a pair of home wins over Kansas and Kansas State. There's much more work to be done.
They needed juice, and they got it.
They're now going to need to win on the road, and they're 1-6 on the road this year.
Right, but the good thing is they need to win on the road, whereas if they would have lost both those games,
it wouldn't have mattered. Right.
They'd be playing out the string.
Yep.
And now they're not.
So
it's a long shot, but it's a shot. It's a much better shot today
than it was on Thursday.
Yeah. And so that's what's cool about it. They've got themselves to have an opportunity. And maybe they've got something. They've got an opportunity to show us that they've got something.
So win at UCF Saturday afternoon, and then we'll worry about the rest of it.
They're roaring into Tucson with all sorts of momentum.
Yep.
And I will root my butt off for them
for
on that
them
game.
To win that game. A win at UCF gets them back to 500 in the league at 8-8.
Then you're in the ballpark.
Yep.
At least you're in the ballpark.
Right.
You're not down in the minor league field. You're at the major league, which reminds me, we're just a little more than 48 hours away from spring training being on TV Thursday, 1 o'clock.
Yay!
Cubs and Dodgers. Don't bother me.
They'll get huge ratings.
Because they play in Japan, so they're starting to skosh earlier.
Yep.
And now, this past Sunday, is the last Sunday that we won't have MLB until November.
So we're now at the point where there's so there's one Sunday that doesn't have baseball or football. 2 if you count the week before the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
The
I'm fired up, man.
The seasons have totally run
college
together.
Baseball kicked off Friday. Devils are 4-0. Sweeping Ohio State. Beating Austin Peay. Yeah. I'm all over it, man. This ESPN Plus, I was glued to the television.
ESPN Plus is your go-to for college baseball. There is so much college baseball.
I had 2 of my 3 institutions of higher learning that I could watch on Friday.
Right, let's do something.
Grand Canyon was playing Friday.
Let's do something.
Lost to Vanderbilt.
Let's do something new here. Oh, really? Threw themselves up against the beast, huh?
Well, it's they call it Desert Classic.
Yeah.
They bring in teams.
Use the spring training facilities, I assume?
I think they were using Grand Canyon has their own.
Oh, okay. I saw a little bit of that. Did you you saw the stuff about Northern Arizona is going to be the Astro Jacks for one basketball game to celebrate their link with all the work they do, I guess, with NASA and space. Pluto was discovered there. It's dark skies there. Have you seen those jerseys? You like that?
No.
Oh, yeah? Here you go.
No, I've seen them. I've already seen them.
You said no.
No, you said, do I like it?
Oh, okay. That was for liking them. I've seen them. No, you don't like it. Stay with the Lumberjacks.
Yeah. Yeah. Come on. Don't be something you're not.
One game.
We're the Jacks.
You still get to be the Jacks. They didn't mess with that. They didn't make them the Northern Arizona Astros. Which probably would have gotten a cease and desist letter from some lawyer for the Houston Astros.
When I hear the word Astro.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't think of astronauts.
Astrodome, Astroterm, astronaut. Yeah.
I think of turf. AstroTurf. It's not called that.
No, now field turf, which is way better than AstroTurf.
Yeah. It's
AstroTurf was just outdoor carpeting laid down over concrete.
Falling down on that. Yeah.
I was stunned when they ripped it out of Rice Eccles Stadium, and I had to go up and do a story on it. I guess it was ripped out of Rice Stadium. You were stunned? Oh yeah, it was literally blacktop right underneath.
That was the second time you went up there, because that one other time you went up for soccer. Remember?
I do.
And you made that discovery?
I did.
Jay Scott was talking about the manifesto last week.
Nice.
And you said, if you don't get on board, you'll be fired. In your manifesto, in which you pledged allegiance to soccer, when you didn't think I was listening, but I was listening at the airport on the phone.
Cool.
And you were insulting me. And he says that,
I know. I think that's a specific.
If you didn't catch the wave, you'd be out.
I think that's a specific story about one person who didn't catch the wave and get fired. I think he tweaked it a little bit.
So he's misleading?
I'll have to talk to him. I guess so, yeah. It's a game of telephone now. Me trying to remember what I said 20 years ago.
Oh, he remembered it vividly.
Him.
I mean, I was almost like the Pledge of Allegiance. He recited it.
I pledge allegiance to the flag.
On your case, soccer.
Of the United States, of the National Hockey League. CONCACAF. What is that, Abacab? A little Genesis there? That's
where it all began.
That is nice. Just free association Tuesday. Hey, you want to give away some more Jazz tickets? What are you thinking, Christian? Should do it right now?
Let's do it.
All right. 801-575-ZONE wins a pair of tickets to see the Jazz and the Thunder Friday night, Delta Center. Caller 12, 801-575-ZONE wins a pair of tickets to see the Jazz and the Thunder at the Delta Center. Caller 12, 801-575-ZONE. Right now. Do it. DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. Your feedback is next.
And it's all over almost here.
Don't go nowhere.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I present...
This is JJ and Alex.
So on a weekend where the Pro Bowl rolls up, we get the most amazing news dropped in our lap. Is this the biggest trade you've ever witnessed, like where we're all scratching our heads going, holy cow?
There have been big trades over the years, but never a player like this in his prime for another player that's an all-star, all-NBA, all-NBA defensive player of the year type level like this, out of nowhere with nobody knowing it was going to happen. This came out of nowhere. Nobody saw this coming.
Luka, poor guy, didn't see it coming. Luka's dad is talking about how he's crying, and he's like, my goodness, he wasn't laying off the cheeseburgers. They start to do this thing where the character assassination after he leaves, too, they go, well, yeah, he's fat. Like, we couldn't keep him in condition. You're going to see Luka Doncic with a freaking six-pack next year, and middle fingers blazing.
Catch JJ and Alex afternoons from 3 to 6. Presented by G2G Bars on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. And now, enough of us. It's time to hear from you. From all your texts, tweets, and posts. This is the best feedback of the day.
Ooh, I was there. It's the best game of my life.
With DJ and PK on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Nominate the youth sports volunteer that you know for the Hercules Hero of the Week. Submit your nomination at kslsports.com/contest and listen every Thursday afternoon. And none other than JJ and Alex are the winner. Help us celebrate the efforts of those volunteers making an impact with the Hercules Hero of the Week. And it's sponsored by Hercules First Federal Credit Union and Beehive Meals.
DJ and PK, the question of the morning, generated a lot of response. How much are you into the Four Nations tournament? U.S., Canada, Thursday night, 6 o'clock for the title. Derek's into it. So much fun to watch. Put on the national anthem, get the patriotism going, PK, and you can get people fired up regardless of the sport.
Oh, I think around here, it's also a little bit of one-upsmanship on the Jazz.
Oh, and the NBA? Absolutely.
Yeah.
The NBA's out there with the multicolored court and gimmicky teams and trying to create some interest in something that lost its juice 10 or 15 years ago. 11-2 and highly ranked at True Blue BYU 1984. It's been really fun to watch. The NBA and NFL need to revamp their All-Star games because they're unwatchable. Well, the NFL actually isn't even playing theirs anymore.
You can't.
Too much contact, threat of injury, too much money at stake.
Yeah, it's too dangerous of a sport. Come on. Basketball, I think there's little excuse. I mean, they have the threat of injury, but the guys play in the summer and go harder than what they do here. They're like you. They went up to Rice Eccles and made a conscious decision, and they've made a conscious decision that they don't want to do it. So I'm out.
Enough said, McGreevy. I watched every game. But I always watch the NHL All-Star games as well. With that being said, this was the first time since I was a kid that I didn't watch the NBA All-Star Saturday night, and I barely watched about 15 minutes of the actual game itself.
Well, it wasn't an actual game, so you don't even know what you were watching. It was multiples, so you're not even sure of the format. I saw one. Somebody said that Adam Silver is, what is he? He's hooked on tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
He wants an in-season tournament. He wants a play-in tournament. Now he's trying to create a tournament here in this All-Star.
Trying to create winners and losers and immediacy because otherwise the players are checking out. And honestly, so are some of the GMs and owners.
And honestly, the players are cashing checks.
Yes, they are. So are the GMs and owners.
So nothing really resonates. I know that people who are paid by the NBA want to go, oh, the NBA in-season tournament is working. On a moderate, at best scale, I agree with them, but it has zero staying power.
Right.
I couldn't even tell you who won it.
I was thinking that while you were talking, I was thinking, did the Thunder win it?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I couldn't even tell you who played. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't watch it, but I'm saying It has no staying power. A month later, nobody talks about it. Nobody remembers it. It doesn't mean anything. It's good for what, and I appreciate trying new stuff. Because unless you try stuff, how do you know what's going to work or doesn't work? So I've got zero problem with them trying to recreate this and make it better. It's just it's not working. But don't stop.
Milwaukee beat the Oklahoma City Thunder in the final.
I couldn't have told you that.
There it is. I had to look it up.
Yeah.
Enough said, McGreevy. The NBA's lost me. I've gone full NHL hockey over the last 5 years, more and more. Now that we have our own team, it's been 100 hockey in our house.
As for me in my house, we watch the NHL. Yeah, I'm not there yet. I've never let the NBA go. I, to an extent, drag through the regular season, but I haven't let it go. I don't think I'll ever let it go.
Well, we might not be dragging through the regular season if the Jazz weren't in full rebuild tankathon mode.
I still think to an extent.
To an extent, I get it.
But see, I'm beyond it. The tank doesn't bother me anymore.
Right, but you also don't feel the need to watch every game.
Oh, I do.
Every minute of every game.
No, I disagree.
You have a 30-point game in the third quarter. You haven't said, okay.
I don't think we get many of those anymore. I mean, they had one with the Lakers, but that was Luka, so I'm watching there.
Yeah.
No, I'm now of the tank. I'm more excited about the product
because of
now.
Collier, because of Collier and Kessler. Right, the young guys are starting to get you now.
Yeah,
we were talking about this earlier in the show. Is this a 30? You went with 37. That surprised me. I went with 30-win team. They're actually trying to win. A 30-win team that should add more good young players. Right, they're going to have 2 more draft picks in the first round. I don't know what they're going to do with all the second-round picks. That'll be intriguing when we get there. They're trading for somebody or something.
For a losing team, I have reasons to watch that I'm excited about now. I'm on the Collier train, and once I get on somebody's train, I root for them like my life depended on it. It becomes personal.
It does. That's my guy.
Right.
You're like a jockey, and you're going to get your horse to the wire to win the Derby.
I want to see this dude flourish. Yeah, I'm fired up for him. And the other guys, Kessler had 6 blocks the other night. They haven't had that kind of performance. Well, obviously since Gobert left.
His third year has been the breakout year.
It really has.
We talked to him about that, and man, the look in his eyes. As soon as he started in on that, his look in his eyes, oh, you guys too, huh? I'm sure he talked to an assistant coach. I'm sure he talked to a head coach. I'm sure he talked to a GM. And on down the line. He'd heard it more than once.
Well, when Ainge makes his biannual appearance and we actually hear his voice again.
Yeah, it could be AI. You don't know.
Is he going to, he basically trashed him after the rookie year. Well, he did it against nobodies.
Yeah.
Well, not this year. I'm excited for the end of the season when Ainge talks about it, because I want to hear what Ainge has to say, because I think he's marvelous at his job, and I want to hear what he has to say individually about, at that point, the third season will be over, and where he sees Kessler now and what he thinks he can be to the roster when the team is trying to win more going forward.
I wonder how much he believed what he said then and how much he was doing it as motivation.
Okay, but still now, what's he going to? He can't downgrade him. Is this guy a big-time player? He's not a 25-point a game. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about being a big-time player in the role that you need him to do. Because Gobert, when they did it, they didn't get where they wanted to go, but they still had a pretty good team.
DJ PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. Look at Ben leaning against the wall, ready to bring 2 hours of genius radio next. We're going to take a break. Ben will come sprinting in here and take over next on The Zone. Stay with us.